Welcome back, Sebastian here. So time for my review for the 2024 British Grand Prix, and what a Grand Prix that was. So many lead changes, so much uncertainty with the weather. We had some decent racing, decent over tracks on take as well. A really good Grand Prix, and I think probably go down as the best Grand Prix this year. That's what happens when you race at these, traditional circuits instead of, cookie cutter races. You generally get much better racing from these kind of old school tracks. But Russell started on pole, Hamilton second, partially cloudy conditions, but there was rain in the distance. Perez opted to start from the pit lane, making changes to the car to perhaps increase the raceability, increase the ability to overtake. A real mix of starting tires, but the top 13 opted to start for the on the medium tires. Ocon and Zhou opted for the softs, and Perez opted for the hard tires. And many were predicting that if it stayed dry, it would stay as a one-stop strategy. Gasly, who had issues, was taking a 20-place grid penalty. Pits after the formation lap, some kind of mechanical issue, a DNS for him. Russell has a really good start. Verstappen was up to third by turn 3, getting ahead of Norris. And Hulkenberg, a bit of a poor start, qualifying P6 down to ninth after that opening lap. Second lap of the race, rain in 25 minutes according to Hamilton's radio. Lap 6, top 4 were all really outside of DRS, and no one was really looking to make a move for position at that point in the race. Lap 8, the soft runners Ocon and Zhou were starting to drop down the order, having been overtaken by the cars who were behind them. Rain expected on lap 16 as well. And that was about those messages were coming out lap 9, lap 10. Lap 11, Verstappen 2.7 seconds off the Mercedes, really showing that in those dry conditions, I really felt like the Mercedes were the best car on track today. Lap 13, Zhou pits for medium tires. Lap 14, Leclerc overtakes Stroll for P7 at Stowe. Good move by Leclerc, trying to make up for a bit of a weak qualifying. Lap 14, Norris starting to put some pressure on Verstappen for that final spot on the podium, and the rain has started falling down. Lap 15, Norris overtakes Verstappen for P3 at Stowe. Pretty simple move, none of the crazy aggressive defensive moves that we saw last time out in Austria. Lap 17, Piastri overtakes Verstappen for P4 as well, also at Stowe. And at this point, in the slightly damp conditions, the McLarens really looked like to be the fastest cars on track. Ricciardo having some struggles today, falls behind Magnussen and Perez as well in slightly damp conditions. Lap 18, Hamilton putting pressure on Russell and eventually overtaking Russell at Stowe to take the lead of his home Grand Prix. The Mercs both go off at turn 1 because of the rain, but luckily it's asphalt runoff, so they can basically just take the shortcut to turn 3. Track limits wasn't really being monitored as heavily as it was at Austria because you're not gaining an advantage really. They basically go off, and Norris takes advantage of that to overtake Russell for P2. Lap 19, Hulkenberg overtakes Stroll for P9, and then Norris overtakes Hamilton, gets the lead of the race into the first corner. So at this point you have Norris in the lead, and then you have the two Mercedes second, third, and Piastri in fourth. Where are we? Leclerc and Perez both pit at this point because they decide now's the time for intermediates. That would turn out to be a choice. It would definitely turn out to be a choice. We'll get to that later. Piastri also up to P3, overtaking Russell, and then overtakes Hamilton at Vale to get P2. So at this point now, McLaren 1-2. Bottas overtakes Leclerc for P19 while the track is too dry for intermediate tires. So what basically it looks like a massive screw up by both Red Bull and by Ferrari, pitting Leclerc and Perez too early. Ocon and Zhou also pitted for intermediates at this point as well. And while there were some parts of the track that was definitely intermediates was the right tire, much of the track was just too dry for inters. And the real problem for both cars was they knew that there was another rain cell coming, so they couldn't just switch back to dries, although perhaps that might have been the better strategy when you look at how things turned out in the end. Lap 24, the second rain cell arrives and much longer than the first. Lap 25, Perez lapped Leclerc too. So basically, everyone else except for those 4 drivers I mentioned before, they all basically survived through the first rain cell on the dry tires. A little bit tricky conditions, but generally everyone was very, very good. The driving standards today was generally excellent, but for Leclerc and Perez, that decision to switch to intermediate tires was an absolute disaster. Lap 26, Sainz putting pressure on Verstappen. Verstappen pits for intermediates, and Sainz does as well, and others as well, including I believe Hülkenberg and Stroll. And it turns out that this lap here, lap 26-27, was the best time to pit for tires. Next lap, the 3 leaders, Russell, Norris, and Hamilton all pit as well for inters, and Piastri decides to go for an extra lap, sitting in P2. My guess is they didn't want to have to do a double stack in the pits, and they decided to gamble on doing that extra lap on the tires, whereas what they really should have done is pitted the lap before, had Piastri pit the same lap as Verstappen and Sainz. Where are we? Yeah, so Verstappen ends up ahead of Russell because of said problem with the double stacking. Russell lost quite a bit of time having to wait for Hamilton's pit stop to end. Piastri almost caught by the leaders at the end of that one lap, showing just how much the conditions changed so quickly. And Piastri was basically really realistically out of the race at this point, given that he was going to be about 25 seconds off the lead at this point. Leclerc has a second stop. Yeah, that's great job Ferrari. Piastri 6th place, and lap 31, multiple drivers coming on the radio complaining that the DAG was very, very high, and that was coming from Verstappen. Lap 34, Russell retires the car in the pits. Really heartbreaking moment for Russell. Of course, this is his home Grand Prix. He would have really been wanting to fight for the win. And yeah, it was apparently a water systems issue. So yeah, really rotten luck for Russell there. Lap 35, the rain ending, and the rain ending around lap 40 is what they were saying on the radio. Lap 37, Norris has a bit of a moment at club, but keeps it on track. So at this point, Norris is still leading, Hamilton P2, and Verstappen is up to P3. And the dry line is starting to form at many corners. Verstappen gaining slowly on the cars ahead. Magnussen and Ricciardo both pit for dry tires at this point. Lap 39, Hamilton and Verstappen both pit for dry tires. Hamilton for the softs, Verstappen for the hard tires. Piastri does as well. Lap 40, Norris pits. So he basically tries to go an extra lap on the intermediate tires. He also pits for soft, but it does seem to be the wrong call. Hamilton comes out of the pits in the lead, and at that point I was really like, yeah, Hamilton's probably winning that race. If Norris had pitted the same lap as Hamilton Verstappen, if he pits on medium tires, he probably wins this Grand Prix. So yeah, really unfortunate for him, but that being said, doesn't take anything away from a really great strategic performance and a really great drive by Hamilton. Lap 41, Verstappen setting fastest laps on hard tires, showing really strong pace. Really strange, the Red Bull. They've been quite slow, not that great in the first stint on the mediums, but for some reason on the hards, the hardest tire in the Pirelli range on low fuel, they seem to be in a much better condition. So yeah, really tricky to understand what was going on at Red Bull this weekend. Lap 45, the Hamilton-Norris gap, 2.2 seconds, and likewise the gap between Norris and Verstappen, also 2.2 seconds. So yeah, very close at this point. Lap 46, Hamilton-Norris gap increases 2.5 seconds. Norris-Verstappen gap drops quite a bit, 1.7 seconds. So Hamilton's better pace than Norris in the much drier conditions, and Verstappen very good pace under those conditions, gaining on both Hamilton and Norris. Albon also overtakes Tsunoda for P9, so that's good move by him. Lap 57, Hamilton-Norris gap up to 2.9. Norris-Verstappen gap down to 1.1, so Verstappen almost within DRS range. Then lap 48, Verstappen overtakes Norris at Stowe for P2. Very simple move, not a whole lot of defense there from Norris. Lap 50 now, Hamilton-Verstappen gap 2.8 seconds. At this point, Verstappen would basically need to be gaining on Hamilton about like a second a lap or Hamilton would have to have like a massive mistake or something. So both of these things highly unlikely to happen at this point. But we get to the final lap of the race. Verstappen's going as hard as he can, trying to chew into that lead as much as possible. But unfortunately, not enough laps left in the race. If this was a 46 lap race, 47 lap race, maybe Verstappen is able to win the Grand Prix, but it's a 52 lap Grand Prix. Hamilton takes the checkered flag. First win since Saudi Arabia 2021, a very, very long time. It's almost, 2.5 years basically at this point. And his 9th win at Silverstone, which is now an F1 record for most wins at a single Grand Prix. So joining Hamilton on the podium, of course, Max Verstappen, a really good drive. In the post-race interview, he actually seemed quite happy despite finishing second. And if he's happy finishing second, the car is probably not that great, and they probably did a bit better than they expected. Norris, they're definitely pretty disappointed with that. I think under the right situations, definitely could have won the Grand Prix today. Piastri fourth. Another guy who maybe could have challenged for the win. If that first pit stop with the intermediates had been done a bit better, Piastri maybe could have been in that fight for the win as well. Fifth, Sainz, another really solid performance. Don't think they really ever had the pace to challenge the cars ahead, and they really just did the more conservative strategy. I think that's kind of putting it lightly, and just took the maximum points available. Hulkenberg 6th, great job as well in the Haas, 6th in back-to-back weekends as well. 7th, 8th, the two Aston Stroll ahead of Alonso, good result for them. 9th, Albon, 10th, Tsunoda, 11th, Sargent. Unfortunate for Sargent, really close to the points again, but no cigar. 12th, Magnussen, 13th, Ricciardo, 14th, Leclerc. I'll talk about that in my power rankings a bit later. 15th, Bottas, 16th, Ocon, 17th, Perez. Again, I think the result on paper is definitely worse than he actually drove this weekend, especially since the strategy was a disaster. But you have to remember, he was basically on an identical strategy to Leclerc in what was probably a quicker car, and he still finished 3 places down, and I think he was 2 laps behind Verstappen. So, not ideal. 18 showed last classified finisher, and then Russell and Gasly were your 2 DNFs, although Gasly was a DNS. Championship standings, Verstappen extends his championship lead again, 55 points. Norris second, 171. Leclerc 150. Sainz 146. So Sainz almost caught up on Leclerc, but it really feels like Leclerc's had so much bad luck the last 3 or 4 races. It's not really representative of what's actually going on. 5th, Piastri, 124 points, passes Perez, who falls to 6, 118. Russell, 7th, 111. And then Hamilton, only 1 point behind, 110. So all of Russell's good work, generally being better than Hamilton for the most part for the first half of the season. Basically, almost all of that just gets undone by the Hamilton win and him DNFing. So, very unfortunate for him. 9th, Alonso, 45. Stroll moves up to 10th, 23 points. 11th, Hulkenberg, 22. 12th, Tsunoda on 20. 13th, Ricciardo on 11. 14th, Bergman on 6. 15th, Gasly on 6. 16th, Magnussen on 5. 17th, Albon on 4. 18th, Gasly, Ocon on 3. And then Zhou, Sargent, Bottas, all on 0 points. I've added the Constructors' Chance standings as well, just because I wanted to talk about it a bit. Red Bull still lead, obviously, 373 points. Ferrari second, 302. They were at one point, I think, quite close to Red Bull in the Constructors' Championship. They're obviously falling behind. McLaren, 295 points, only 7 points behind. Probably will overtake Ferrari at Hungary in 2 weeks' time. Mercedes, 221 points. I think they're definitely back in the fight for at least fighting Ferrari. I think, not sure if they're going to be able to fight Red Bull, but that's definitely a discussion for later in the summer. 5th, Aston Martin, miles off, 68 points. That being said, really good points again, really consolidating that 5th place. 6th, Red Bull, RBs, 31.7, Haas 27. I think that's going to be a really interesting fight going into the second half of the season. 8th, Alpine, 9 points. 9th, Williams on 4. And then 10th is Sauber on 0. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked the video, please like and subscribe. It really helps out. I'll be back later today with my power rankings. Goodbye.